Okay, go ahead, Nancy.
Okay, well, some of you know me, some of you don't. And I'll just tell you just a little bit about me. I did not start writing until I was in my mid-50s. Not that I didn't want to. I wanted to write for years and years and years, but I let life get in the way. If I had it to do all over again, I would have started way sooner. But because I had been a teacher, I decided I wanted to write for children. And I did at the beginning. But then I branched out, and long story short, I found that my strengths really lay in creative nonfiction. Then I started writing a little poetry. So I just read a little bit of everything, and I encourage other writers, don't just stay in one little slot. Give it a try. If you haven't written something in this phase or that, give it a try. You might find something that you really enjoy. So I was asked to be the reader tonight and read some of my work. And so I'm going to start out with a children's story, which was an award winner at No Wonder magazine. It was inspired by a newspaper article that I read, just a very little tiny article that said about working parents were sending their children to the library and using the library as a babysitter after school. And that's what inspired this story. And it's called There's a Dragon in the Library. Wilhelmina Higgins' long braids bounced as she ran down the narrow tunnel between bookshelves in the Westlake Public Library. Her untied shoelaces slapped against well-worn sneakers. Past the J's, K's, and L's she flew, slowing only slightly as she rounded the corner where she screeched to a sudden stop. Her brown eyes grew large when she spied the dragon waiting at the end of the row. At first silent, the monster began to snort a little, and then it lifted its huge head, took a gigantic breath inward, and became silent once more. Wilhelmina swallowed and took a step backwards. Before she could turn to retrace her path, the enormous dragon reared back on its hind legs, threw its massive head back, and breathed out with a whoosh. Smoke curled from its nostrils.
So, yeah, we found an amazing church in our area called Grace Covenant Presbyterian Church. Now, here's the bad.
Sorry. I think we need to mute the other mics. Okay, I lost my place. Before she could return to retrace her path, the enormous dragon reared back on its hind legs, threw its massive head back, and breathed out with a whoosh. Smoke curled from its nostrils and flames poured forth from the great mouth. The dragon clawed the air and flapped magnificent wings. The green and purple scales that covered the beast from head to toe gleamed under the library lights. Wilhelmina Higgins, the dragon shouted, how many times have you been told there is no running in the library? Wilhelmina answered in a quivering voice, oh, do you mean today, Miss Philpott, or all week? You know the rules. Why do you come here after school if not to read? Miss Philpott was breathing heavily while opening and closing her hands into fists. Wilhelmina feared she might start snorting and breathing fire again at any minute. Wilhelmina answered in a stronger voice, my mother doesn't come home from work until 5 o'clock. She says the library is a safe place for me to stay after school. The dragon pulled a sweater close around her shoulders. If you cannot follow the rules, you must go outside. It's cold outside, Wilhelmina answered. Then go sit on the steps. The steps are hard. You could stay at school. Miss Philpott barely moved her lips when she spoke, and Wilhelmina answered in the same way, her lips barely moving. There's no one there. Then you must study while you're here. Miss Philpott's eyes flashed and her hands turned claw-like once more. I've studied all day, Wilhelmina told her. She folded her arms and spread her feet apart, ready for battle. Don't be insolent, the dragon said, breathing noisily. I don't know what that word means, Wilhelmina said. Then go look it up, Miss Philpott walked rapidly back to her desk. Wilhelmina felt a tug on her shirt tail. She looked down at a small girl who continued to pull on the shirt. What do you want? Wilhelmina asked. Is she mad at you? The younger girl said. Every day, Wilhelmina said with a sigh. So what's your problem, Lucienne? I'm bored, Lucienne said. Well, then go read a book. Wilhelmina sounded a good deal like Miss Philpott. Can't read yet, Lucienne replied, pushing her bottom lip over the top one. Oh, go away and leave me alone, Wilhelmina said. And she walked quickly down the line of shelves, ignoring the brightly colored book jackets as she passed. She stopped at the tall library windows where the rain beat against the panes, and the window rattled each time thunder boomed. Wilhelmina placed her elbows on the windowsill, curled her hands around. All right.
Oh,
I'm
Nancy,
sorry
we
about-
need to hear the story. Read us the story, please.
This-
You stop, Christy.
Didn't you
Just put her
remember?
elbows on the window.
Did you hear it? I'm sorry. Well, let's go on to something else. I'm going to,
Nancy, we probably
that
could
re-
remember
that
where
I
you
wrote.
left off. We probably could
Mhm.
remember where you left off. You were, she was,
There was a little girl talking to her. Let's
She,
see.
she just put her elbows on the window and was looking out at the rain.
oh, okay. Okay, let's see. Blah, 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 blah. When Lucy Ann held up a large picture. Read this to me. Well, why not, Wilhelmina? Read the book, Ann offered. And they marched past the dragon's desk. Miss Philpott remained silent, but Wilhelmina thought she could see tiny wisps of smoke curling from the librarian's voice. The girls sat at a round table and Wilhelmina read aloud in a quiet voice, wiggling on her chair as she turned the pages. Lucy Ann interrupted. You could do better than that, Wilhelmina. And she scowled. Listen to yourself. You sound dull. After a moment's silence, Wilhelmina said, you're right. She sat up straighter, flipped back to the first page, and she read with feeling. She used a different voice for each character in the story. And halfway through, she noticed 3 more listeners around the table. One of them said when she stopped reading. Wilhelmina laughed and continued reading and showing the children the pictures. And from the corner of her eye, she saw a long-haired, fluffy cat. Its amber eyes surveyed the group at the table as it danced on dainty paws. The cat purred deep in its throat, and Wilhelmina closed the book. The cat purred again. Wilhelmina Higgins, you read that book most wonderfully well. Perhaps you could start an after-school story club. What do you think? And she purred again. I think I would like that very much, Miss Philpott, Wilhelmina said, reaching out to shake the paw the librarian handed her. So that's Wilhelmina Higgins.
Yay! Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to read a poem now. I started writing poetry, and I have to tell you, I have had no training whatsoever the writing of poetry. I just write what I feel from the heart. And one morning I got up, and it was an October day, and I saw snow on my rose bush. Anyway, this is called Snow on the Roses. I found snow on the road this October. Too soon, too cold, not now. Summer only a breath behind. Autumn barely begun. Grass mowing. Unexpected, just like the silver hair, the lines etched in my fast changing face. Youth a mere whisper, back a handful of years. Too soon, not needed, not now. And when I said that, it was just about the snow on the roses. Turned out to be about aging. So you never know what it's going to do. And another thing that I do, I have a blog, which I have tips and encouragement for writers. And I encourage writing family stories. That's one of my main projects, is writing family stories. And this story was called A Spoonful of Fudge, and it's a family story. And it was published in a Chicken Soup for the Soul book called Chocolate for Soul. And this is a true story. It really happened. Spiral back in time with me to a mid-December day in 1947, one of my true memories. Our teacher's guidance, my 3rd grade class planned the Christmas party held on our final day before the holiday break. Our classroom looked festive thanks to a live Christmas tree decorating our artwork. Cut-out paper snowflakes adorned the tall windows, and in free time, we'd made construction paper chains, which we used to decorate every available space in the room. But now the most important part of getting ready was upon us. Miss Marshak asked for volunteers to bring Christmas napkins, cookies, and punch. Now, what else would be good to have at the party, she asked. And a boy in the last row hollered, fudge. Yeah, there's one word straight, and I waved my hand in the air. When the teacher did not call on me immediately, I bounced up and down in my chair and I gestured furious. Yes, Nancy, she finally said. I'll bring the fudge. My mother makes the best fudge in the world. And my mouth watered at the thought of the creamy, rich chocolate candy my entire family loved. I could hardly get home and tell my mother that I'd volunteered to bring fudge for the party. She'd be so excited to share her special fudge with all my classmates. I barely felt the cold December air as I hurried along the 6 blocks from our school to our apartment building. My feet scarcely touched the stairs as I sailed up the 3 flights to our door. Mother stopped peeling potatoes when I burst in the kitchen. It's a great news, but I didn't get the reaction I'd expected. Her face paled. Fudge? Isn't there something else you can bring? No, other people signed up for all the rest. And my excitement deflated like a pricked balloon. What could be wrong? Mother shrugged and picked up the potato peeler and she said, it's all right, I'll make the fudge. The December days slid by one, and I helped Mother prep our Christmas decorations. I took my brothers and me to pick out a tree. Mother's dinner days, wrapping packages and baking special cookies and Christmas cakes. At school, we practiced for our part in the all-school musical prom, read Christmas stories in reading time, and created our own in language arts period. Giggles got louder as Christmas surrounded us. And finally, the day before the party arrived, our teacher went over a checklist to make sure that everyone remembered what they were to bring the next day. How could I forget? I thought every day about the wonderful chocolatey fudge Mother would make. I could almost taste its smoothness and the lingering sweetness it left. And when I got home that afternoon, my baby brother was crying, and Mother looked about to cry along with him. What's wrong? I asked. My worry centered not on the baby or my mother, but on the fudge. And I came into a kitchen chair. I've made 3 batches of fudge today, and none of them worked. They're all too soft. I can't send it to school. I had no idea why she was so distressed. Fudge was always soft and gooey. We spooned it up every time we had it. Why, was all I could think to say. Nancy, my mother said, fudge is not meant to be eaten with a spoon. It should be firm enough to pick it up in a piece and pop it into your mouth. I beat it, but it's like it always is when I make it too soft. And I made it 3 times today. Tears welled in her eyes, and my baby brother reached up and patted her cheek. Maybe even he knew how bad she felt. How could I bring the fudge to school? I love my mother's fudge, but maybe nobody else would. Maybe they'd laugh when they saw it. And I worked up my courage and I said, what are we going to do? And the next morning, I carried a big pan of fudge and 21 spoons to school. The soft candy was a hit of the party. After we had our punch and cookies, everybody gathered around the cake pan of fudge, spoon in hand, and dug in. My fears were never realized. One of the boys licked his spoon and said, you were right. Your mom does make the best fudge in the world. Agreement sounded around the circle, and we dipped our spoons for more. Some years later, Mother began to make a new fudge recipe that contained marshmallow cream. The ads promised it was foolproof, firm fudge every time. They were right, but the spoonfuls of soft fudge we'd eaten all those years before remain my favorite. And you know, when you think back about things that happened in your childhood, the things that impressed you are clear. I mean, when I wrote that, it was like I was right there again. It was so real. And I remembered her words, I remembered all of it, you know, so kind of things. Those are the things you want to write about. Okay, we'll do one more poem here. This one, oh no, I had another one here I wanted to do first. This was a winner in the Kansas Authors Contest, a number of years ago. And it was a theme, and I can't remember what the theme was, but it's titled Artist All. Painting with oils, watercolors brushed across canvas, clay molded by loving hands, marble chiseled to exquisite form. Artists ply their trade by the golden light of day and velvet depths of night with passion and verve. One more artist joined the rank. The writer brushes words over paper, molds a story bit by glittering bit, chisels a novel to survive the ages. The writer gathers life's stories from country roads to city streets, written from the depths of a heart, bursting with intensity and rapture. Artists all, masters of creation, be they painters, sculptors, or writers, leaving footprints on canvas, marble, and paper. heartfelt tributes embraced by mankind. Any writer would be able to relate to that, I guess. I don't know how we're done. You want one more?
Yeah, don't fudge
Okay.
on us. Don't fudge on us now. Give us another one.
Okay. Another thing that I like to write, and I encourage other people to do, when you travel, write about it. Don't write a travelogue like, we went to this museum on Tuesday at 4 o'clock, and then we had dinner at such and such a place. That's not the kind of travel I want you to write. What I suggest is taking a special moment or special memory from a trip and enlarge upon it. And this one is called A Hungarian Hotel in Germany. And it was published at a travel website several years ago. Our heads were fuzzy and our legs like jelly when we left the long overnight flight from Kansas City to Munich, Germany. After clearing passport control and getting our luggage, we headed to the rental car area of the airport. Despite our fatigue, we managed the paperwork and checkout with only a minimum of frustration. An hour later, we settled into a Mercedes C-Class sedan and made our way out of the city, Ken at the wheel and map in my hand. Our second job of the day was to locate the hotel we booked on the internet. I'd searched diligently for a reasonably priced hotel not too far from the Munich airport. I found many, but somehow one kept calling to me. So I clicked and clicked until we were booked for the first 3 nights of our 3-week stay in Germany. The half-hour drive to Hohenlinden turned into an hour and then another hour, and we learned that German roadways are excellent, but the German road signs have a great deal desired. We also discovered that the GPS in our rental car was programmed in German, useless for us. Round and round on highways and byways, roundabouts and little-traveled pathways. I was near tears and Ken near eruption point when we somehow pulled into the small rural village of Hohenlinden. Relief is too mild a word to describe our feelings. Surely, Zerlinda would soon appear. I think it's on the outskirts of town, I told Ken as he gripped the steering wheel more firmly. Not so, he said, slowing down in front of a 3-story stucco building with Hotel Zerlinda painted on the side, right in the middle of town. He pulled into the side drive and round the parking area, and we walked wearily into the hotel. A small reception area appeared dark and rather uninviting, but a young girl in the office cubicle smiled and greeted us so warmly, our spirits rose like a hot air balloon on a sunny day. All we wanted was to go to our room, take a shower, and change clothes, but it was not to be. Oh, I'm so sorry, the young woman said in perfect English. You cannot go to your room until 2 p.m. You can have lunch first. And her smile erased any irritation we might have had as she led us to the outdoor beer garden, surrounded by greenery and arbor and sweet-smelling flowers. We could easily kill an hour and a half there. A tall glass of the local beer and a bowl of Hungarian soup helped revive us. We lingered in the pleasant outdoor garden until 2, when we unloaded our luggage and stepped into a tiny little elevator to go to our room. It was small, but clean and neatly furnished. A big window looked out on a church across the road, and the bed with a snowy white duvet sheet and soft pillows looked so inviting. Showered and clothes changed, we set off on a walk around the town. Quaint houses, small shops, and flower gardens brought smiles to our face and cooled our blood pressure back to normal. In one front garden, a man wearing a long cotton coat worked with wood using a standing saw. Seeing him thrilled Ken. He told me he'd seen pictures of men doing work like that and wear a coat to protect their clothes. And as we walked, we discussed our plan for the next day when we were to go back to the Munich airport to pick up good friends from South Africa who would be traveling with us. In the evening, we went to the formal dining room and enjoyed a leisurely and excellent meal served by a waitress who had charm plus. Several patrons ate with well-behaved dogs lying next to them. The girl who had checked us in that afternoon was gone, and her mother was the dining room hostess and hotel clerk for the evening. Mama was tall, slender, and blonde, wearing spike heels and a low-cut blouse. We chatted with her and were a bit surprised to learn we had booked into a Hungarian hotel. good German beer and German food like roast pork and red cabbage and potato dumplings, and a few Hungarian items on the menu. So not a problem, especially with the special way we'd been welcomed. When our waitress brought our food, she asked what we would say in English to wish someone a good meal. Enjoy, I told her, or bon appetit. And with eyes sparkling, she called out, enjoy, as she hurried back to the kitchen. Our food proved to be as satisfying as the hotel itself. We'd noticed the church across the street filled the summer air with its bells every hour. Lovely bells, which chimed for a couple of minutes. We strolled over to the church after dinner, found a small cemetery on one side of the building. Each plot was outlined in paving stones and perennial flowers, some with stone angels adorning the area where the marker sat. We were taken with the care that Eve had been given and the gentle, dainty look the flowers and statues added. Hand in hand, we crossed the road to our hotel and bed. I can't wait to see Mike and Mavis tomorrow, I said to Ken. At 6 a.m., the church bells began to peal. Nice, I thought, as I pulled up to Duvet and snuggled deeper into the but the bells went on, and 15 minutes worth, enough to wake the entire town. Surely no one in Hohenlinden needed an alarm clock. After a pleasing breakfast, we zipped into Munich in less than half an hour. Things you can do when you have the proper directions. We picked up our friends at the architecturally impressive airport, brought them to Hotel Zerlinde. Our innkeeper greeted them warmly as new guests and we as old friends, having been there an entire 24 hours. What a nice place this is, Mavis said to me as we helped them to their room down the hall from ours. We met then in the beer garden for a tall glass of beer to toast the beginning of our time together, living halfway across the world from one another, together outdoors that night with many people who were having a good time in the chatter and laughter. And this morning I asked if there was a guest. Oh yes, the innkeeper said, and she led me to a folding screen in the breakfast room, which hid the computer. I tried and tried to get onto the internet, but I couldn't find the little A on the keyboard. I finally gave up and went to ask for help. That is a Hungarian keyboard, the woman told me. Come, I'll show you what to do. You hit shift and A comes up. Success at last. We're in the opposite of our keyboards. Were the figured out, and I was able to check my email. We woke up each morning at the 6 o'clock bell concert. By the third morning, I was awake and waiting. Instead of being irritated at the early awakening, I looked forward to it, knowing a wonderful German buffet breakfast awaited us on the floor below. Fresh fruits, cereal, cold meats, cheeses, hard rolls accompanied by strong coffee and pastries filled us to satisfaction as we lingered in the sunlit dining room. And before we checked out, we booked it again for our last night in Germany, negotiating a lower price for our return visit. After touring the back roads, small towns and villages of southern Germany for 3 weeks, we returned to Hohenlinden. When we pulled into the parking area, it almost felt like coming home. The four of us strolled into the reception area, and our Hungarian innkeeper came to greet us, 3-inch heels clicking on the tile floor, her face alight with a warm welcome. We were definitely home. A rainy night meant dinner in the formal dining with a fire burning to take the chill out of the air. Good food and drink and a recap of all we'd done while touring Germany gave us a lovely final evening in the Hotel Zerlinde. The grand finale came at 6 the next morning when the church bell concert began. I lay in the comfortable bed listening to the swell of the bell tones. Pleased I found this charming small hotel. Or did it find me? With so many choices, why did this one keep calling out to me? We checked out after breakfast and loaded the car, ready to go to the airport. The four of us made one last trip inside for a warm farewell from the Hungarian hostess of this very special hotel. And the church bells rang to let us know it was 8 o'clock as we drove out of town. So that was my Germany travel story. Okay. Well, it looks like it's 7:35, so maybe we should let some of the other people do some reading. Okay.
I first want to say,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say thank you, Nancy. I really, really enjoyed listening to those.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, who would like to read next? Don't all rush up here now. Otherwise, I'm going to have to read some more if you don't read something.
Go ahead, read some more.
Nobody?
Right.
Well, if nobody else brought anything, well, let me see what I had here. Well, this another family story. And this happened when I was 9 years old. And again, because it was something so special, it impressed me so very, very much. And I never forgot it, what happened and all the little details about it. And it too was published in A Chicken Soup for the Soul story. It's called Grandma, Raspberries and Cream. Now, you might remember this was a totally different time. You would let a child do this today, but in those days, people did it. I was 9 years old when my parents put me on a train in Chicago. Dad slipped the porter a few dollars to keep an eye on me until I reached Rock Island, Illinois. And when the Rock Island station, wheels and puffs of steam, I slid to the edge of my seat and I peered out the window at people waiting outside. Excitement and fear moved in because I didn't see a familiar face. And the porter bent down and said, "Come on, miss, this is where you get off. Your grandma be waiting for you." I followed the man down the aisle and I let him help me down the 2 steps to the ground. And before I could look around, my grandmother appeared. She nodded her thanks to the porter, accepted the small suitcase he handed her, and clasped my hand in hers. Grandma was tall, slim, and serious. No hugs and kisses. She wore her long hair in a braid wound around the top of her head, and her rimless glasses gleamed in the sunlight. She walked fast, and my little girl legs had to work overtime to keep up with her. We marched for several blocks at this smart pace when Grandma stopped so suddenly I nearly fell on my face. She pulled me into a neighborhood grocery and let go of my hand as she picked up a small wooden box of red raspberries and a smile lit up her usually sober face. "We'll have these," she told the clerk as she handed him the box of raspberries and some money. Well, we kept on going until we reached a big yellow house with a fence around it. Grandma opened the gate and climbed the steps, pulling me with her. "This is the rooming house where we're staying," she said, as she opened a screen door. I wasn't sure why my mother and father had sent me here. I knew Grandma lived in Arizona now, not here in Rock Island, where my grandpa lived. I'd never seen this house, and I didn't like the narrow hall we entered with a steep stairway ahead. I didn't like the smell of dinners long past that seeped into my nose and stayed there. We climbed the steps and went down another hallway to a small bedroom. "This is where I sleep, and you'll stay with me," Grandma said. She laid her pocketbook and my suitcase on the bed and laid the way to a tiny kitchen that held all the necessary equipment. The kitchen table sat under a sloped ceiling, and a red geranium perched on the windowsill, while white curtains fluttered in the open window. A calendar picture on the wall showed a calm blue lake with August 1948 printed underneath. Grandma washed the raspberries, divided them into 2 glass bowls, and poured heavy cream over them. Placing them on the table with 2 spoons, she said, "Now sit down and have your raspberries. They're only good if you use on them." And they were good, sweet and tangy, covered in smooth, cold cream. They were so good that I think of the day Grandma introduced me to this wonderful fruit every time I see them. And I know that they need real cream to taste the very best. When we spooned up the last bit of cream, Grandma told me it was time to go see Grandpa. My hand tightened around my spoon, and I wished there were more berries in the bowl to delay the visit. My mother said he was sick and he wanted to see me. Was that why Grandma was here? Was she taking care of him? My friend's grandparents lived together. Mine did not, and I didn't know why. We moved down a long hallway to another door, which Grandma opened, and we entered a small bedroom that smelled stuffy and like medicine. It had a sloped ceiling too, something I'd never seen before. I studied it carefully so I didn't have to look at the bed right away. And finally, I moved to the side of the bed where my grandfather lay. He looked like the grandpa who came to visit us. He didn't look like the grandpa who brought me a cigar box filled with pennies he'd saved for me. He didn't look like the grandpa who savored my dinner made for him. This grandpa looked thin and pale, deep circles under his eyes. His silver white hair was combed neatly, but there was a bit of stubble on his face, and his hand trembled as he reached out to me. Grandma nudged me, and I moved closer and took Grandpa's hand. "How long have you been here?" he said in a quavery voice, not like Grandpa at all. I looked up at Grandma, not sure what the answer was. She said about an hour. Grandpa chuckled. "If that had been your mother when she was your age, she'd have known everybody in town by now." This was the grandpa I knew, and seeing him release the knot of strangeness and fear in me, and I chattered on about my mother, my father, my little brother, train, the rest, whatever came into my word. Finally, I told me we'd better. And when I woke up, I reached up to touch her cheek. Her skin looked so soft, and she put her hand around mine and squeezed it ever so gently. Our day went on with short visits to Grandpa. One made me wait in the little kitchen while she gave Grandpa a bath and shaved him. And when she was done, she came to get me. Grandpa asked me questions about school and my friends, and sometimes he closed his eyes and lay there quietly. But I knew he wasn't asleep. He was sick, but no one told me what was wrong. When I was sick, I got well in a few days. But somehow I knew Grandpa wasn't ever going to get well. It was only weeks after I returned home that my mother got the call that made her cry. She hugged me close to her. She wiped her tears. "The last thing my dad asked for was to see you one more time, and he got his wish before he died." I didn't fully understand then, but many years later, I realized what it must have meant to him, and I understood what my grandmother had done. Even though they'd lived apart for so many years, she spent those last weeks by his side caring for him. Though she never said a word about what she was doing, I learned something about duty, loyalty, and yes, love from this serious grandmother who also taught me the joy of a bowl of raspberries swimming in real cream. And I love them to this day. So, okay, well, let's see what we got here. I have another poem. This one's called The Hourglass. Sand collected in an hourglass, each grain a momentous moment in years of living, laughing, loving, as we watch the pages of our lives turn one by one, then saved. Piled up in the bottom of the hourglass, visited on occasion, but never truly replayed, only saved for posterity, who might totally disregard it. Gone is the life that sifted and slipped through fingers, young and wrinkled and dry, forlorn and forgotten at the end draws near. The glass breaks, sending the sand adrift on winds, heading out to sea, where the bits of sand and life join others already resting peacefully on the bottom.
Nancy,
Well,
I would be
yes.
glad to share a poem.
Oh, good. Thank you. Please do.
And then maybe some of the rest of you will. This one is called The Seed, Cuba, Kansas. And Cuba, Kansas is a small farming community that was supposed to die out a long time ago. And a photographer from the National Geographic has been taking pictures of Cuba, Kansas, the dying town. It just hasn't died yet. He started it when he was, I think, in college, and he's not retired now, but he's in his 60s now, I think, maybe 70s. Anyway, I'll go ahead and read it. The Seed. 2 blocks from the roast pork, the Eternitzy, the sweet sour of grout and dumplings. 4 boys sprawl across the playground, the chilled wind chipping at their smooth faces. They test the spinners, leverage the redesign seesaw, grasp the handholds of the various climbing apparatus, then settle on the tall tube slide, its thick yellow rings a shelter from the wind. Soon they are throwing rocks on the top, the muffled sputter raining on the boys sliding downward. The tallest scoops the rocks onto the slide's gaping sunlit mouth, and one after another, the boys plow through the hard drifts. Next, the tallest sheds his winter coat, lays it flat like a blanket, and shovels handful after handful of the rocks onto its quilted lining. He grabs the sleeves in the lower corners, forms a makeshift bag, hefts it to the ladder, then calls for help. Load follows load. The rocks tumble down the enclosed slide like wheat through the metal conduits of a grain elevator. Sweat on their temples, the boys tumble with the rocks through the yellow glow of the tunnel. Years later, the four will throw open the door of the community hall, smell the warm pork, the sauerkraut, the Ethernitzy, check for friends and relatives on the chairs lining the long tables, shuffle their feet to the polka, just a couple of steps, then tunnel through the rain of voices. So I'm challenging Tracy or Kathy or Joe, one of you to read something.
Anybody else want to read something?
Yeah, I have something.
Okay, Kathy.
Okay. This is a poem that I wrote, and it's called Eternity. One of my favorite things was getting to write teacher poetry for the end of the school year when we had our NEA final banquet of the year. So this is one that I read. It's called Eternity. Chris, your poem made me want to read this. A child kicks at gravel beneath the swing. The crossbar above her seems as high as the moon. She shoves hard and wonders, if I fly high enough, will I reach the stars? Then will I be special? Will everyone remember me if I do? A boy hammers his collection of stones, setting sparks flying off the granite edge. He hits hard and wonders, if I find gold, a diamond, the missing link, then will I be special? Will anyone remember me if I do? Time slides by, the children grow, and daydreams slip away. The child now a woman and the boy a man, transformed to teachers, new, intense. She glares at blank slate boards, black and ominous. He clenches brittle chalk in sweaty palms. Both wonder, if I turn now and run, will they still find me? Will anyone remember what I do? After all these years, the answers come, scribbled in crayon. Dear teacher, you're my best friend. Shouted, see, teacher, I can do it now. Whispered in a senior's embrace, I never would have made it without you. Hundreds of children tell their children, I'll never forget Mr. Blank. He was the greatest. Or, I hope you get one like her. She was special. They all remember what you do. For here are your diamonds. They are your stars. For all these years, you've kicked hard, swung high, and let the young fly free. You've passed the stars into eternity. That's it.
That's very, very nice. Lots
Thank
of
you.
good stuff in there. Anybody else? If not, if does anybody else want to read anything?
I bet
If not,
Tracy has. I bet Tracy has something. Do you have something, Tracy?
I'm sorry, I'm on my phone and I'm not, it's very hard to figure out how to get to places. I have my whole computer here in front of me, but I don't know that I have anything I could just pull up and read right now. I'll pass. I'll listen to you all.
Okay, okay, right.
Joe?
Okay.
I'll
Well, I
pass
have a
tonight.
question.
I'll pass tonight. That's okay.
Okay. I do have a question. How many of you submitted some of Kansas authors writing contests this year? Chris, you surely did. Dwayne did. Tracy did. Kathy? No, no, no. You know what? I got news for you. You can't win if you don't submit.
That's
that's the
very
thing.
true.
That's what I often say on my blog. Send it in. You cannot get published unless you submit. It's the only way. I had a man that was a writing group many years ago, and he used to say, no one's going to climb in bedroom window, open your top dresser drawer, and take your manuscript out. It's up to you. And I learned a good lesson from him. It's true.
It's
true.
good
If you don't
advice.
submit, nothing happens. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Well, do you have any writing questions or that maybe some of us could answer?
Didn't Jolene say she had something to share?
Not tonight.
I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood.
I have a poem I can share.
Okay.
This is entitled Our Genius Eyes. We're all geniuses after all. Some solution in my soul cleanses the lens of my genius eye whenever I consider a stranger. Some penetrating agent dissolves cataracts of contempt that would cloud my quick perception of kindred spirits. In early Cambrian days, our native eyes emerged from dust with specks embedded, and in our struggle to survive, seemed best fitted to focus on enemies. But in this integrating age, we're beginning to perceive our greatest struggle is to evolve from our predator nature by learning to sustain one another. And we owe this revelation to some solution in our souls that cleanses the lenses of our genius eyes until we clearly see a landscape free of enemies.
Thank you, Dwayne.
Okay, and how many of you are signed up to go to the convention, our virtual, once again, convention? Raise your hand.
I
Okay,
am not yet, but I will. That's on my list to do
Okay.
tonight.
good. Good. Right, exactly.
Ms.
Miss Spencer, I
thing
can't
have
remember
yet.
what your first name was. Miss Spencer,
Oh,
I said, cannot remember your first name.
okay. It's Nyla Jean, but I go by NJ. And I have some,
Well, okay,
can you hear me?
yes,
Okay.
yes, okay.
That's fine for the virtual convention. Yes.
Okay, and for the rest of you, if you don't know, she's in Annapolis, Maryland.
Oh,
And
cool.
She
Right.
came with us. Tell them about your Kansas connection.
Oh, okay. And then I actually do have a short Where I'm From poem that I could read. I grew up in a small town in Kansas, Marysville, Kansas, in the very northeastern corner. Then I went to the University of Kansas, and eventually I married my husband, who became a Navy doctor, but he was from Kansas as well. And so because he was in the Navy, we've lived all over the world, including Okinawa, Japan. But long story short, we have 4 children. Our eldest daughter actually got her commission to the Naval Academy from Kansas, even though we lived in Okinawa, Japan at the time. And she's a graduate of the Naval Academy. And she eventually went on to get her PhD in chemistry from Johns Hopkins University. And she now is a chemistry teacher at the Naval Academy. So while she was at the Naval Academy as a student, we had, of course, visited. And so we ended up living here. And so we live here now, and we enjoy it. So I guess that's my best explanation of Kansas. Connection.
We're really pleased that you joined us and hope you will come again because we're going to be doing this the second Tuesday of every month.
So
At this time.
go ahead.
So you said you had a poem.
So I have this is a Where I'm From poem that I'm sure everybody who's done a poetry class, it's kind of a form that you follow. And so since it kind of talks about Kansas, I'll read it. It's where I'm from. I am from sunflowers and hollyhocks, from the true land of Oz, from where the imaginary jayhawk struts to applause. I'm from waving fields of golden grain. I'm from a sign which read, the customer is always right. I'm from peanut butter whirl whips and cherry mulberry pies. I'm from homemade prom dresses to nights dragging Main Street. I'm from shocks of grain that adorned their caskets before they were laying under the granite cross. I'm from the shadow of my older sister. I'm from contests where spellers are king. I'm from the hallowed halls of the Ivy League with all their presumed glory and place where I discovered gladly would I learn and gladly would I teach. I'm from everywhere following my Quincy all over the world. I'm from places where you hear Konnichiwa and Ikurudeska. I'm from the bottom of the Grand Canyon to the top of Mount Fuji, where I learned only a fool climbs more than once. I'm from where home is where the heart is. I'm from labor pains to toddling feet. I'm from Mother Goose to poetry alive. I'm from bowed heads and bent knees. As you can see, I'm truly from everywhere, and I'm truly thankful for the gift of life from God when he created me.
Nice. And it was very Kansas at that start. Thank you. That's very nice. I enjoyed that. Chris, would you like to mention anything? Chris has the program for us in October. Would you like to give a little preview?
I've been, while you were offline, I talked a little bit. Since it's so close to the contest in the first Tuesday after the convention, so close to the convention, I thought I'm going to save some of those speakers that I was thinking of for a later date, but I would like to present how to work with classroom teachers to help kids write creatively, because I've done that quite a bit. I was a teacher, and then I have gone into the classroom quite a few times to work with teachers, and I have a few hints I always like participation, so I will try to get some of you to participate as well, because I think it works out quite well if people can get involved.